Okay, so I'm not going to talk more about myself. I just want you to take a note of my contacts on the left of the screen. After this talk, if you have any questions, comments, please feel free to reach out to me. You can use any of these methods and I'll make sure I'll get back to you. So uh, why should we talk about disaster recovery, high availability for Azure SQL database, right? Most of the time people think when you start this journey, you read some documentation from Microsoft, and then you think, everything I get copies of 3, the storage get copied, my compute has extra capacity. Why do I need to worry about it, right? This is a real life example, as you can see here. A bunch of resources related to Azure SQL database was down for 16 hour, 11 minutes in one of the region, right? And this is in 2019. So every time I give this talk, I go to this URL and I do check the recent outage. And as you can see here, there was one in the July. And recently, I personally had an experience that we lost connection to our secondary replica. It was a multi-subnet cluster, and we were reading from the secondary. All the connections got timeout, and we did reconnect. And then we went to check the resource health of that resource in the portal, and we found out that the underlying physical host was rebooted by Microsoft, and without any notice, right? So things will happen, right? Because these are still hardware, network, cooling, power, electricity, all that, right? So you will still have issues, and depending on your business, right? So I do have apps that are running in Azure that solely rely on automated backup. But then I make sure that I go to the business owners and I give them the SLA that has been published by Microsoft, that if you're really relying on the backup, this is your SLA. So you might be out for 12 hours, you might be losing an hour of data, and we can restore from the backup. Are you okay with it? And if they say okay, that's fine. So I give them the cost, give them SLA, let them decide, right? I give them, it's kind of a menu, right? You go to a restaurant, they give you a menu with the price, you choose what you want to eat and how much you want to pay. Similar concept. So before we dive into this, I'll probably talk about for half an hour and then it's all demo. Do not worry about taking notes or anything. I will upload all this in my GitHub repo, and because I made some changes, because Azure, every time if you don't do this talk in few months, you come back and you find new things. So I do update. I've made a lot of changes yesterday. So I'll refresh the repo and then you can download everything from there, use it, share it, do whatever you need to. So most of you are probably familiar with these two terms, right? RPRTO. So if you are not, I have a simple definition for this that I'll show you. But there is another concept that's called ERT. That's the estimated recovery time. And this is per resource, right? Because when you go to Azure, you're not just talking about your SQL Server host, right? You might have, your network, your other stuff. So everything has to be up, your app servers, for your whole app to work, right? So you want to find out what's the recovery time for each of the component or each of the services. And then you declare your RTO based on the max ERT, right? So the component that will take most of the time to recover, that should be your RTO, which is a recovery time objective, means how long I'll take to recover to the state that I was in before the disaster. And recovery point is, what point I can get my data back to, right? So can I lose an hour of data? Can I lose 10 minutes? Can I lose 12 hours? Based on that, you have to decide, what solution you're going to deploy. Since you're a small group, so I don't know how the organizers want. So if you have a question, comment or anything, you can, I don't know if you can put in the chat or if you're, can unmute. I'm fine with both, but I would appreciate if we can hold off till I go to the demo, because it's a live demo. So there'll be few pauses, when I'm running stuff against Azure, because I'm in Boston, I'm using East US. maybe that would be a good time to, do some engage into some discussions. So this is more of a visual slide for someone to understand what do I mean by RTO. And there's one caveat that I want to mention that sometime a disaster can happen and we as a data professional might not know. So what do I mean by that, right? So maybe you're doing a deployment off hour, right? So like 9 p.m. and you did a delete probably without a where clause, right? Maybe I did it without the proper parameters or whatnot. And maybe some data were modified or deleted that was not expected. But I might not find it, right? Maybe next day morning when the business is on at 9 a.m., someone finds that. So you can have a period between your disaster and between request for recovery because you didn't know that there was a disaster, right? So now should this be part of RTO? Because you even don't know that time frame, right? It can vary every time. So this is something you want to also make sure that you make it clear to the stakeholders that the RTO that I'm promising to you is from the request for recovery time, not when the disaster happened if I don't know immediately, right? So you want to make that very clear and document that. This is a slide. I don't want you to memorize this. This is all documented in Microsoft's website. But as a data professional, as a DB, as a data engineer, you might want to, know about this because if you don't know what are your options to deploy a Azure SQL database, and we are not going to talk about hyperscale or managed instance. I'll be primarily talking about Azure SQL database PaaS model because of the time that we have, because there are, some differences between all these flavors. So we're just going to stick to Azure SQL database with PaaS. And I put some documentation at the end that if you need it for managed instance or hyperscale, you can go and read about those. So why do you need to know the purchase model, the compute model? Because some of these options that I'm going to show you are not available in all of these flavors, right? So some are restricted to some hardware, some different tiers. So unless you know what you're deploying, it will be difficult. So you don't want to deploy first and then decide what kind of high availability or disaster recovery solution you want. You probably want to first decide what your business partners need and then track back and tell them, okay, we can deploy into these different models and see, where they go and show them the price. Now, because I mentioned here D2 and vCore, these are two different ways you can deploy Azure SQL database. D2 model was the initial one when Microsoft released or Microsoft launched Azure SQL database. vCore model came later on. D2 is it's abstract, of your compute, your I/O, and your memory. vCore is more straightforward. You know how many CPUs you are getting. You know how much memory you are getting per CPU. Microsoft now recommend you deploy in a vCore model, but still, if you look at the price point, right? If you have like very low end app that that does only a few queries in a minute, you can still get by with the D2 model, and it can get cheaper. So I still have Azure SQL database running under D2 model, and I'm not switching to vCore because that's just going to increase my costs. So we're going to talk about redundancy, right? So, and redundancy, when you go to Azure, you probably want to think about all these five, right? One is the deployment, right? If my deployment goes wrong, can I redeploy with my script, right? So you want to make sure that your code is redeployable, because if your company might have a standard, how you want to monitor this, how you want to set up your alert, where you want to send your diagnostic information, all this, so you can put in a template, ARM template, or you can do PowerShell. All this is better not to do it from the GUI every time. Then you might end up with different configurations that you don't like. In case of a disaster, if you want to redeploy, or if you want to redeploy in a different zone, then you are not ready for that. Then it comes to data center. So Microsoft within a region, you have many data centers, and so you want to make sure that you have data center redundancy. And then within a data center, within a region, you can have zone, which we'll talk about. You want to think about that, which might cost you more money, depending on what model you deployed. And then you think about region and your geography, right? If you're in different countries, you have business in different continent. You also want to check, can you replicate your data to a different country? Like in US, we are lucky. We have many region within US and many data center. But if you're in a small country, you might not have more than a zone. And then if your requirement by the government or by the company that you're doing business that that the data cannot cross the geographical boundary, then you might have to come up with a different solution, right? Like I personally know when I worked at Monster.com many years ago, we had business in UK, and UK had very strict rule about UK government, is one of our customer, about their data crossing the boundary of the United Kingdom. So these are some of the solutions I'll be talking about now. Some of you might be scratching head by looking at the temporal table here. And I really don't consider that as a real HADR solutions, but I did mention that because with temporal table turn enabled, you can restore your row versions from back point in time, but there's also some limitations, right? If you have column store indexes, that's only available in certain tier. So you want to read about that. And I'm not going to talk about it because there's really not much difference between on-premises and Azure SQL Advisor, but I just want to mention that if you have it on, you can go and restore from some older point in time in case if you have a disaster and you don't have any other solutions you put in place. So before we talk about this, I just want to give you an example of what I've been talking about and why we should look at different options, right? As you can see here, RTO, RPO. So if you're just solely relying on the backups, right? If your whole region is down, and if you want to restore in a different region from these backups, because backup do get replicated to a different region, so you can you can restore from there. But the SLA that's given by Microsoft is a 12 hour. So if someone is going to rely on that, you can tell them that, hey, I will not be able to restore your SQL Server or your databases for at least for 12 hours, right? That's by Microsoft. You might be able to do it early, but don't commit to it, right? Because that's what Microsoft said. You're not making it up. And you can lose 1 hour of data. Now they might say, oh, no, I cannot, we cannot do this, right? This business, the line of business you are in, that's not acceptable. Okay, then show them the next one, right? And they don't like it, show them the next one. But and you also want to give them the price point. At some point, then they can talk and they can come back and tell you this is what I want, and then you work backward and you deploy resources. So let's talk about automated backup. So before I show you what's available, one thing I want to mention that you lose precise control. And why do I say that, right? So this is from Microsoft documentation or books online, some of you call it. You really cannot determine exactly what time you take a transaction log backup and what time you take a differential backup or a full backup like you can do on premises with SQL Server Agent or any third-party tool. So it depends on your workload, right? So if you have a RPO need for 5 minutes, you might not be achieving by this because if you go to the next slide, you'll see that the transaction logs happen approximate, right, between 5 and 10 minutes. So you have no control on that. You cannot do that. You can do that on premises today, but not in here. Differentials between 12 and 24 hours, full backup weekly, but it doesn't give you a date time that's the time I'm going to take full backup. You can go and see. I actually did a blog post recently. There is a DMV that's available to see when the backups are taken. But that's after the backup happened, right? Not before. You cannot control it. Point in time backup, except for basic service tier. I mean, for all you get 7 days by default, but you can increase it up to 35 days, and that might cost you more money. And so even for many business, like even the business I'm in right now, my company, 35 days point in time is not enough. We do need to keep historical data because I'm in an investment management firm. If they come and want to see an older trade or whatnot, then for the Federal Trade Commission, we need more data. So you have long-term retention that you can go up to 10 years. And if any of you need more than 10 years, then you probably have to come up with a customized solution. Now, how does the long-term retentions work? You can do a weekly backup, monthly backup, and a yearly backup. So what's the yearly backup? It's nothing. You just mentioned that which weekly backup you want to consider as your yearly backup, and you can say keep that weekly backup for this many years. And I'll show you this in a demo. So what can you do with your all these backups? We can do a point-in-time restore. If you delete a database, you can do a point-in-time restore. But remember, if you delete a server, you cannot get back those backups anymore. So be careful. You can also restore those in a different region. Just so you know. Uh, so cannot override an existing database, of course. And like I said, if you delete a SQL Server instance, you cannot restore a database from point-in-time backup. You can only restore it from your long-term retention. So just keep that in mind. Um, I get this question. This has nothing to do with the topic today in hand. So I just want to mention that as per Microsoft documentation, they do test restore, they do DBCC check DB, they do checksum. All the backups are taken with checksum. Yeah, so so these are there. Some of the testings are not currently available in SQL managed instance. So like I know like DBCC check DB is not. So if you're running SQL managed instance, you might want to schedule that by yourself. Another question I get, can we restore this on premises? No, you cannot. You cannot take those backup and just restore, but there are other tools that I mentioned here. You can leverage some of these to extract the data and load it. Also use schema. I'm not going to go into any more details with this. Okay, so I'm going to take a pause because I'm going too fast. Any question? I don't know if you can unmute or you can put in the chat.
There is nothing in the chat yet, but please people go ahead and unmute yourself and ask the question since we are a very small group.
Yes, I would rather answer your question than, go in a bullet speed. So
did you talk about the soft delete? That if you once you delete the database, the backups will be there for 7 days.
yes, as I said, if you
Yeah.
delete your database, you can restore from
Yeah.
everything. But if you delete your server, you can only go to the long-term
Yeah.
retention, but not the point in time. So
Yeah.
that's the caveat that you want to be careful. If you're deleting a logical SQL server, you want to make sure that you are losing your point in time backups too.
Okay, good point.
Okay, so I'm going to move on, but folks, please stop me. Right? Like I said, a small group we'd rather discuss. Then just go with my flow. So uh, as you deploy your Azure SQL database, by default, and I'll show you this in the demo, by default, you get some built-in redundancy. So what do I mean by that? If you're going with a basic standard general purpose tier, the way it does it, it has two layers. So if you look at the picture, on the top section, you see the compute and you see the attached SSD, it only says TempDB. So this is a stateless compute layer. So if anything happens to these VMs or to the underlying SQL server, the Azure Service Fabric will recognize that there's a problem. What it's going to do, your data and log files that's actually a stateful layer, right? So your data and log file is in a separate storage, which is locally redundant, and your backup files is in a different storage, which is getting replicated with geographically, to a different region. And if it sees that there is a problem, it is going to detach your data and log files from the compute, and then it will fail you over to a spare capacity where it will start another SQL Server.exe. When that engine is running, it will attach your data and log files again, and you are back into business. And you do not have to do anything. Your connections will see failure, but if you have, retry, it will automatically connect. And I'll show you this in the demo. So this is you get with basic standard and general purpose tier. This takes a little bit longer because it has to detach and attach, whereas in premium tier, which I'll see in the next slide, you do not have to do that. So that's a lot faster. Now you see the picture. Here you see that you have SSD, but your data and log file is attached to each compute. So here you automatically get your data and log file, 4 copies attached to your compute. And one of these out of the 3 spare ones, when you are submitting a transaction, it must get copied to the at least one secondary before you get the acknowledgement. So, so that is persisted to at least one secondary replica before committing each transaction. So if the Azure Service Fabric sees a problem with the compute, what it's going to do is going to fail you over to the one that's up to the mark and that's synced, and then it will spin up another copy, and it will copy your data and log file and remove the one that's not working or that's in a bad state, remove it, from the mix. And your backup files is same as the other tier. Here recovery is extremely fast. Even from my machine, I'm in Boston, and the East US is about 600 miles from here. You'll see that even from my home, I get it done like within like less than 15 seconds. I'll get reconnected. You do not have to do anything. And one advantage, if you're in premium and business critical, which I'll also show you, you can use this spare nodes or the secondary replica, to use the right term. You can use those for your read traffic. So in your connection string, if you use application intent equals read only, without paying extra money, you can offload your read traffic. But I'm not talking about the license. I'm just talking about the compute and the storage. So license is it's a totally different discussion. I'm not going to even get there, right? But you probably want to consult that, with your licensing rep. How much you're going to pay if you're using those for read. So this is built in, right? We are not doing anything. So next, so within the built-in, you get a redundancy within a data center, right? Now we are going from data center to zone, because some of the regions are broken into at least 3 zones. So if any region they tell you that you can avail zone redundancy, you are guaranteed to have at least 3 different zones minimum. And what does a different zone means? Means each zone has its own power, cooling, and network. So that's guaranteed. They're all independent. So how does this work? Again, if you're in a general purpose tier, few things is disabled by default in every tier. You have to turn it on. In general purpose, it's going to cost you additional money. And when you turn it on, it gives you a warning. I found a discrepancy that if you read the documentation, it says that in East US, this is generally available. But if you go to the portal and create this and try to turn it on, it will give you a warning that this is still in public preview. So I did send an email just yesterday when I was looking at it. I'm not sure yet. So just be careful based on your zone or based on your region. You want to make sure that it's in general availability or it's still in public preview, because your company might have a, I don't know, some companies don't want to use public preview because there are some things that you have to tick that, you take those risks. So depending on your business model, you might not want to do that unless it's a GA product or service. Look at this line, only available with Gen 5 compute, right? So sorry. And this is one of the reasons I said before that if you agreed with the business owner that you want zone redundancy and you deployed already in a hardware or with a compute other than Gen 5, now you are stuck, you cannot deploy that, right? So go backward, first decide what solution you want, then you go and see what tier you want to deploy your resource. So here again, the same thing. These are stateless because you only have 10 dB, and this is your data and log file is separate. And if it sees the issue, the fabric sees there is the issue, it is going to detach the data and log file, move you to a different compute, fail you over to a different zone, and then it will attach your data and log file, because your data and log file is continuously getting copied to all 3 zones, right? And premium and business critical works the same way I showed you. Here we have data and log file attached to each compute. So it will just switch you over to a secondary replica in a different zone. Again, it's disabled by default. You want to check this out before you turn it on, because now you are switching from asynchronous to synchronous replication. So what do I mean by that? If you are staying here, you are in asynchronous replication, except one node. As soon as you come here, it has to sync between all. So you want to check your latency and see if your business can handle that, right? Otherwise, you know, yeah, you might not want to turn this on. And this is free. You do not have to pay extra, like if you're in the general purpose, where you have to pay extra money if you want to turn this on. And again, I want to reiterate this. This is a URL that you can go. It actually gives you a more detailed SLA for all flavors of Azure SQL database with different options. So you want to read that, take notes, go to the other stakeholders and show them before you really decide a solution, right? Even with the turning on zone redundancy give you more uptime compared to not turning it on, right? So, but again, you are paying more money if you are in general purpose tier, plus your latency increase if you're in business critical. So you want to discuss all this with your business partners. Now we're talking about region redundancy, right? Active view replication. If you are familiar with always an availability group on premises, it is actually built on the same code base and the same technology. I actually said here in my slide that it leverages the always an availability group technology. So it's the same thing, right? It's a you know continuously replicating your data. You fail over if you have an issue with your primary in the region, but here also you can use your secondary for read-only traffic. And one thing you have to be careful here is that you are not going to, this is a asynchronous replication. But one thing Microsoft guarantee that you are not going to have partial transaction, right? So you're not going to get half-baked transaction to the secondary, whether you get everything within a transaction scope or you don't get anything. That's guaranteed. And you have to manage your connection string by yourself. It is not going to automatically redirect your traffic to the secondary. Now, you might say that I have a transaction that I absolutely need to make sure that it made it to at least one secondary, right? Because of a business logic. So what you can do, I'm not going to go into detail, but you can look up this store procedure. You can use this within your transaction. It will make sure that this transaction is synchronized to the secondary before you get the acknowledgement back. But don't use it loosely because then your users will be waiting for a while, for say like East US to the Microsoft's recommended zone is the central US, right? So if every transaction has to synchronously replicate from East US to central, and then your users get acknowledgement back, um, they might not like it, right? And it all depends on your business. So you might want to use this very carefully. Now, one thing you notice here, this box is within a single database. So if you've been following the journey of Azure SQL database, right? When it first came out, everybody said yes, it has to be a single database app. A app should be just running, on a single database. And when people start migrating, they find it difficult, and they start using multiple database, for one app. And then also when they fail over, because the active geo replication that I showed you, you can only fail over a single database at one time. But in on-premises with availability group, we can fail over a set of databases at the same time, right, with the failover group, with the uh, availability group, sorry. So, as people start giving feedback, so finally Microsoft came up with this concept of auto failover groups. This is bundling more than one database, and you can fail over at the same, transactionally consistent. And with that, you also get uh, kind of a listener. No, not kind of, the exact term is a listener. So you get two listener. One is for read write, one is for read only. And if you use the listener names in your connection string, now you do not have to manage your connections manually. Once it's fail over, the traffic manager will automatically route it to the right destination using the listener, and it will go to the right place. And we'll see some of this in action later on. This is not available in Hyperscale. I have a note here. But there are, some differences I'll show you. So this is what a listener looks like. Failover group name with the database.windows.net. This is for read write, and then it says secondary means this is for read only. When you set this up, there's a setting called grace period with data loss hours. Initially, when I started reading about this, I was not convinced, or I really didn't get it what they're trying to say. So I reached out to a couple of people in the Azure SQL database team, and we have multiple email conversation, and I captured those in a blog post. If you're using this, I would recommend you read that. It will make it clear, if you should be using this, and if you should use this or you should not, and if you use this, what kind of value you want to use. So we just don't have time to go into details. This is one slide I created, give you a summary of differences if you are using Active Geo replication and auto failover group, what you get and what you don't get, right? And like one of this, you have to, like with Active Geo replication, you can get up to 4 replicas, whereas auto failover group, you do not, you just get one. So you want to be aware of that before you deploy this. I get this question all the time. How can I check my replication status? So this is nothing fancy, just from books online. This is a query that you can use. So I mentioned many times during my, in last 35 minutes that you go to your business partners and talk to them, right? So if you're new to this business, you might not be confident, or you might not know what are the questions I'm going to ask, right? And this is not an exhaustive list, right? These are the questions, some of the questions that I ask when someone come to me, say, hey, I need a new Azure SQL database, you're looking at a new app, or this and that. These are some of the questions I'm going to ask them, right? And I'm going to take notes, show them the price, and then I'm going to offer them what I want to do and how much it's going to cost them, and then come into agreement. And like I said, this is not a full list. You might have other stuff, or you might already have one. If you think that's something I should definitely add, send it to me and I'll add it. So we'll go to demo. I'm going to show some of this. And then these are some of the resources that I talk about. So I think this will be a good time to take a short pause and answer any questions.
No, there is no question in the chat.
Okay. 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 So if no questions, then
I do have a question.
go ahead,
If
Lori.
you do not sign up for this durability, what is the general recovery time for a Azure SQL database to be recovered without paying that extra money? Can they recover it? And what is the average time for recovery?
So you are saying I just deployed Azure SQL database and I do not do anything else.
Right.
Okay, so you get point in time 7 days of backup. So you get full backup, differential backup, and transaction log backup for 7 days. That's all you get. Those backups get copied to different region. So now, depending on the type of outage, right?
Right.
If it's just down, it's going to come up. If they lose a region and Microsoft tells you that we cannot recover, you can spin up Azure SQL Server in a different region and you can restore from these backups. RTO is 1 hour. Sorry, RPO is 1 hour, RTO is 12 hour as per Microsoft's SLA.
Okay. So you want to really encourage your client's team to get some kind of redundancy built in.
No, I do not, to be honest with you. I have a different, I like in my, and I don't do consultancy. And I have a full-time job, but I have my own internal clients, right? I currently have apps that I only rely on, not 7 days, I increase it to 35 days. I have long-term retention, but these apps are fully, they can regenerate the data from flat files or from other app stream sources, right? Um, so they do not want to pay extra money. So if we ever have a region down, which I haven't seen I'm working just over 5 years in Azure. But if they need, I told them, you'll be down for 12 hours, and they are absolutely okay with it. At the same time, I also have apps that's doing active geo replication, that's doing auto failover groups. So I have all kind.
Okay, so it just depends on the requirements for recovery.
Right, and I give them the price and tell them this is what, because our billing is really per business unit, right? So everybody has to take care of their own billing within their budget. So it's we push these decisions to business owners, system owners, but we sit down with them and help them. Someone come and say, I need to reduce my budget. What is my option? I again go back and show them we can do this. Is that okay with you? Right? And then we put it in a document. It's all documented. Yeah, and then we go from there. Even like long-term backup retention, I have different people have different years. They talk with the legal, find out what they need, what they don't need.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so before all of you came online, I actually ran through, and I'm going to share all this. This is I'm using Azure Data Studio. If you do not know, this is a tool written by Microsoft, multi-platform. I'm using something called Notebooks. And this is a PowerShell kernel. It has many other different kind of notebooks. There are many resources how to get started with Azure Data Studio notebooks. So take a look. The advantage of this is I can put my comments, I can put my code, and then I can run it. I can save it with the results set and send it to someone, right? So before all of you came online, I actually ran through up to here just to save time. So demo starts here, right? The reason is just to save time, because if you have to watch me, deploying all this, it's going to be a little bit longer. So just for the sake of clarity, this is what I did. I deployed 3 Azure SQL Server. These are logical servers, not same as on premises. And I have 2 databases. And I haven't set up any, nothing, whatever I showed you. And to prove my point, if I go here, what I was telling to Laurie, if I go to backups, and I have a database that oh, sorry. As you see, I only get 7 days, right? I do not have any long-term retention, nothing. Now I can change that. I can come here, I can slide it up to 35 days unless I'm in a basic tier, right? And I'm not going to do anything, most of the stuff I'll do in PowerShell, like I said, that way it's repeatable. I can do it over and over, but I'll also will show some stuff in the portal just so it's visual, easy to consume. I mean, at what time I should stop? I don't want people to sleep on me.
No. You have 15, 20 minutes more.
Okay,
So.
great. Okay, enough. Yeah, thanks. I just want to make sure that. So And I put enough comment on all this. When you download, you can run through this. And if you have issues, just send me a note. So as you can see, there is no weekly, monthly, and yearly retention. And now we're going to set up weekly retention of 12-week, yearly 5-year. What does the 5-year means? Means 16, 16, 16 weeks backup, keep it for 5 years. That's what it means. And I'm actually glad to see Lynn. Lynn is one of our, we have a small group that we talk about workout in Twitter. So Lynn is in that group. So now I ran this. If I go to portal, I refresh this. As you can see, I have now weekly backups 12 weeks, keep week 16 for 5 years, right? So I have a long-term retention now set up. And now if I want to see the status again, you can see that I can do this. If I do not like long-term retention, I want to get rid of it. You can use this command. They are all from AZ module. AZ has many submodules, and these are all there. And if some of you are using Azure CLI, also you can do all of this through Azure CLI. I'm just using the PowerShell commands. And so now if we go back here, we do another refresh, you'll see that we don't have long-term retention anymore. And it stopped me if I'm going too fast. I will, run this again. So I talked about built-in HADR, right? As you saw here, I haven't set up any availability group. I haven't set up any failover groups or anything, right? And if I go to the portal, I have one database. This is in a general purpose tier. And I have another one. This is a business critical. So just for demo, I have the code for both. You can run it. I'm going to do the business critical one. So I'm using a tool called Ostress. I put a link here. What we're going to do, we're going to do continuous select statement from this Azure SQL database. It's just pretending, we have an app that's running here, and then we'll fail over and see what happened. Okay, now you see, I'm continuously doing a select. Your app is running, all good. And I'm going to issue a fail. This is a command that Microsoft released recently for test purpose. You do not do this failover manually. And you cannot run this. I think you can only run this every 15 minutes only once. So this is just for practice or to make sure. So now we get a disconnect, right? As you can see, my app says I cannot connect. The server is not available. I'm getting some error message. And I'm connected back. So it's probably less than, I took, to get the acknowledgement back, printing here is 16 seconds, but the real connection really happened a lot quicker. Any question? Put this in the chat. Oh, okay. Someone dropped, that's fine. So this is built in. I haven't done anything. Let's look at Active Geo Replication, right? The next I talked about Active Geo Replication. So let's go to the portal. And as I said before, Active Geo Replication is per database, right? Not multiple database. So if you go to this database, if you go to replicas, we have no replicas right now. So nothing is set. We can do it from here, but I'm going to do it from the PowerShell, as I said. It's going to take some time because it's going to clear the database and sync it from primary to the secondary, right? And now if you go to the portal, start refreshing, we should see something pretty soon. We should see a replica, and then we'll do a failover. This is not the best time to do demos, right? People come home, they watch TVs, stream and all that, so your speed goes down a little bit. Definitely a little bit longer than, when I was testing. It's done here. Am I in the
Someone
wrong?
has how to stimulate a failover for Azure.
Sorry,
That's what
say again?
Amy is saying how to simulate a failover for Azure. There's something option for that.
Yeah, so that's what I showed in the previous demo. Is that, Amy, is that what you are? Because I did simulate a failover for one of the Azure SQL database when I was showing you using the voice stress. Is that what you were asking? So I can show you the command again that I used. This is the command: invoke Azure SQL database failover.
Yeah, I guess my question is more about when I try to do testing. For example, on-premise, I can shut down my primary server, and then I can fail over to DR and to do testing. In Asia, I'm not able to, or I haven't found out a good way, because apparently I can shut down a server. If I shut down the Asia single database server, the logical server, I'm
No,
not able to bring up DR or another instance anymore.
no, you cannot.
Yeah, then how do you test it? Like company would asking us to testing the DRs or replication scenario. How do we kind of make up a incidents, make the primary down? Then we can say, hey, we are able to bring up DR by using failover group or geo active replication. I'm not able to simulate a disaster in Asia.
Okay. So are you talking about in the case of active geo-replication or failover group? Maybe once I do this, I can, maybe it will answer your question. So just hold
Okay,
on to
that's
that.
really great.
Yeah. So right now you see I have a primary server in East US. I have a secondary in West US, right? These databases are replicated, right? Being replicated. This is read-write. This is readable. I can send my read traffic here. Now the question I may ask, what can I do? I can do a planned failover. You can go to this doc. I can run this. And you will see that my primary server name will change. So now this is my primary. So now I'm primary in West and I'm secondary in East US. So you can do this and then ask your team whether you do ASR for your app servers to the other data center and tell them to bring it up there. I don't know if that's what you were asking me or.
Yeah, this part I'm able to duplicate, but is there a way you can intentionally shut down the primary instance, for example, so that you can say once the primary is truly done, whether your DR scenario works? Like if this is on premise, I can easily just shut down the primary server.
No, you cannot. You cannot. Not the way we can do on premises, right? Because because the Azure Server Fabric is not recognizing a failover from its side, right? You are doing it manually. So I doubt that you can do something the way we do on premises. I think the only way you can do is, once you do this, and if your app is running all your resources are failed over to the other region, and if you can run it as is, I mean, I would be happy with that. So, okay, so I'm going to, fail back for the next demo. So the next one is auto failover. So here we saw that, you can fail over a single database. We have to manage the connection string by ourselves. And then, we can fail over to the, as you saw here, I failed over to US. And then, now I'm going to fail back, right? So we are back to where we were. So the next one is a failover group. So I'm going to first create a failover group. And failover group is at a server level. So if you're at a server level, you go to failover group. If I refresh, I have a failover group. I do not have any database yet, right? I haven't configured any database. I can add a database from here, or I can go and add it from here. Because I already have Active Geo application going on, this will be a lot faster. Now I can see I have a database connected. One of the settings that I was talking was the grace period. The minimum is 1 hour. You can set to 2 hours, or you can set it not to do that. So make sure you know what you are doing here. And here also you can see your databases, what is the status and all that. And you can do failover from here. You can do a forced failover, but I'm not going to do it from there. I'm going to show you the command. So here I can initiate a failover, and then you will see now that the role of the primary will move to West US, and the East US will become the secondary. I talked about endpoint. These are the two endpoints you should copy. Send it to the folks, whoever set up your app. If you have app support, or if you're doing it by yourself, you should use this in your connection string instead of hard coding your server name. Because if you're using these listeners, when you fail over fail back, you do not have to do anything. As you can see here right now, the West US became primary, East US has become secondary. I talked about read scale, right? That with the business critical, you automatically get your secondary replicas. You can use those for your read traffic, right? Without spending any extra money. So let's look at that. So let's disconnect. Connect again. And if you go to advanced here, you can do the same in SSMS. You have it for read write. Okay, connect. And you choose your database. It is read write. Now, if you go and change this connection and change it here to read only, this is same as application intent equals read only, right? In SSMS property or in your connection string. Okay. This is always a struggle to show it here. Let me go to SSMS. It's a lot easier for me to, because it caches the stuff. So if I put this in the, you say it's read only, right? So that's something, if you're in a business critical tier, you can take advantage of that. So that's pretty much I have for demo, nothing else. I will upload this to my GitHub repo. And then let me go to slides, see if anything else is there.
Hi, Tayo, can you put in the chat your GitHub repository link?
Yes, I will, but do not copy it right now. I haven't. You can also scan this and download because I haven't refreshed it. I was making change, but I'll put the link right now. This is against some of my contacts that I showed you before. In case anyone get my code, you run into any issues and all that. So feel free to ping me. So. And I do appreciate, you joining and listening to me. So
I'll stop the recording. Yeah.